Adam had actually mentioned to me that that he that he needed to go. He was going to have to go right after we get off the air. He was going to have to go right off the air, and I was like, oh, okay, so no time for overtime then today, right? We don't want to do that today. And he was like, no, probably not. And I was like, okay, well, that's fine. I had been thinking about looking at some of the comments from from our recent video and reading some of them and responding to them because they've been pretty funny. But and he was like, oh, that sounds like fun. I want to do that. I can stay for a little bit. We can.
Yeah, I mean, I could stay for a couple minutes. Let's see what they're talking about. Yeah. Those of you who know me, you may realize that I've been very off the grid. Aside from this radio show, I try to stay off social media and kind of, I have taken a step back from public life, so to speak. So, yeah, it's always interesting and disturbing and fascinating to hear the discourse, quote unquote, on the internet.
Right. So the background is that we talked about last week Jimmy Dore. Last week we talked about Jimmy Dore attacking the Chicago Teachers Union for democratically voting to shift to remote work during the largest wave of the pandemic, where hospitalizations are nearing a record high. I think maybe today or yesterday we actually hit record deaths. We're skyrocketed past record cases. We're coming up on record deaths if we haven't hit it already. And the Chicago Teachers Union said the demands, the COVID safety measures that we have been fighting for this entire pandemic, some of them have still not been implemented. And because this is an emergency, we want to shift to remote learning temporarily until some of these things get worked out. And so they did, and they worked some of them out, and they didn't get everything that they wanted, but they got some of the things that they wanted. And the Chicago public school system locked them out. They cared so much about their students' learning that they locked the teachers out of the equipment that they needed to conduct remote learning. So they care so much about their students' learning that they didn't allow them to learn at home, despite having invested tens of millions of dollars in everybody having the equipment needed to learn at home.
But hey,
but it's the teachers' union's fault, right?
But if it got some parents pissed off at the teachers as opposed to the district and the city, then they accomplished what they were trying to accomplish.
And that's exactly...
And driving the wedge between parents, students, and educators and the broader community.
And that's exactly what Jimmy Dore contributed to. Jimmy Dore, sometimes he identifies as a progressive, but mostly he identifies as anti-establishment. He hates MSNBC. He hates Joe Biden. He hates Jen Psaki. And, whatever, fine. I don't care. That's fine. I don't care.
I mean, hate's a strong word, but otherwise, I'm vibing with that.
Yeah, that's fine.
I try not to pay much attention to him, but I'm also opposed to those people.
But on this issue, he sided with all these people that he hates and says exactly the same thing, talking about this misinformation about how Omicron is so mild that you should just deal with it and you should work while you're infected. I mean, we've talked to an epidemiologist about this. There is room for hope, but we're not there yet. This is still a pandemic. This is still thousands of people are dying every day. This is not a cold yet. Hopefully it will be with some of the future variants, but it's not yet. And he's acting like it is, and he's acting like we should just go about like everything's normal. So we talked about that, and we clipped that. And put it up on our YouTube channel, and there were some people it was 40% of the people who reacted to it disliked it. And that's even with YouTube not showing. YouTube has they've done this thing where you can see how many people like a thing, but you can't see how many people dislike a thing. So there's actually less incentive to dislike it because no one can see that you dislike it except the creator. But I saw it, and it's like 40% of the people disliked it. So there were lots of... We got...
I'm confused because it seems as if this guy, and it certainly is not unique to just Dore, but, he's one of the figures that comes up a lot. But it seems like the folks like him have this fan club.
Right.
And something we've touched on it a little bit in this show about how politics has really just been sort of subsumed into entertainment and spectacle and consumption. And really, when most people talk politics, that's really what they're talking about.
Right.
Which is why, we try to discuss and propose an alternative, which is labor organizing. That's real world. When I get more money in my pocket or when I, fight to get my coworkers back pay, that's real world material politics, not, celebrity crushes on Twitter, which seems to constitute most of the political discourse in this country.
Yeah, so here's one that I thought was particularly rich given your background. Hashtag Action for Assange was the username. Which that's fine. I think that Julian Assange is being wrongly persecuted. Jimmy's wife is a former public school educator, so he's in a unique position to know more about the education professions and their unions than most people in the United States. Well, Adam, his wife is a former teacher.
Well, my wife is a current teacher, so I win. I also have an active teaching license, and I have taught in multiple schools.
No.
And
but
I worked for a supposed union, a education association. They're not a real union. Don't call them that. They get offended. So I guess I win the contest?
Adam, no. You're a former school teacher. You're a former union staffer. But look, Jimmy's wife is a former teacher. So really, who knows more about teachers and their unions? When you think about it.
Yeah.
When you think about it. And so, and they, somebody else said that it was very clickbait and that we should maybe instead focus on the powers that be not having proper testing in place, etc., and that we should punch up
almost
instead.
like the Chicago Teachers Union we're trying to do.
Almost like, it's like, and so this guy, Cheddar Mountain, is his username. Did he even, watch the thing? That's what? That's what they wanted. That's what the Chicago Teachers Union was fighting for. That's what Jimmy Dore attacked them for fighting for. And he was on the side in this argument of the people fighting against the people fighting for proper testing. It's like, I don't think this guy watched it. He can't have watched it. He can't have watched it. I told him to tell Jimmy that because he's the one that chose to side with Biden and MSNBC and Lori Lightfoot and the Republicans. And he said that, I don't need to tell Jimmy anything. He gets most stuff pretty okay. But what he doesn't do is blame other YouTubers for the funky situation we are in. He blames the man and corporate interests. You're young and lefty, and that's okay. You'll grow up someday and realize that uniting to fight the power is a good thing. What?
Yeah, I'm not really following there.
It's like
I just want to state for the record, I'm not going to speak for you, Jacob, but I can speak for me that I certainly talk a lot about power, and I recognize the relative power that YouTubers have in our society.
Right.
I'm not going to blame Jimmy Dore for the actions of Lori Lightfoot and the Biden administration or the Koch brothers and the billionaires who have financed a very sophisticated school privatization attack.
Right. Yeah. Our clip, when we talked about it, we obviously did not imply that Jimmy Dore is the CEO of the Chicago Public Schools. We implied that he was standing on the side of power, attacking teachers for fighting the power.
Right. Right. And that's the concern. If you're going to be, ostensibly for the people against the establishment, this is a good test of where you really stand on that. And, I think there's unfortunately a lot of folks out there just grifting.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's him because I don't know enough about him. Again, I stay offline compared to a lot of people. Right. I'm not as interested in these kinds of things, and they're, so sometimes our listeners on YouTube and elsewhere teach me things about these folks because it's kind of like a niche subculture.
Yeah.
I think left politics, and I'm using left very broadly here because it is used very broadly, but it does sort of seem like a niche subculture, like if back in the day you were into emo music or, punk, and that is not, well, that's not really a pathway to building a robust working class movement.
Right.
I'm glad that there is now media out there kind of catering to that position. I'm glad that there are more folks of prominence, so to speak, that are kind of on our side, theoretically at least. But yeah, we definitely cannot just be an online subculture. That is not going to move us forward. And it seems like some people have really unhealthy relationships with talking heads on the internet. Like, I don't know, are mainstream news, are people the same way with like mainstream cable news, or are there like Jake Tapper heads who, if you criticize Jake Tapper, they're going to come swarming for you? I don't know. I mean, maybe there are. I don't know. It's just, it's very strange.
This guy then said that it's pretty clear that we're a psyop. So I don't know what that means. And then he said,
if I am, no one's paying me jack. So Russia, FBI, CIA, whoever is allegedly paying us to do this show.
Yeah. The check is late.
I don't know who to call. I don't know who to call. Moscow, DC, whoever.
Yeah.
Hit me up.
Yeah.
You probably have my routing number already, I'm guessing.
Right.
So.
Yeah, so those were some of the comments. There are some more if you want to go take a look at the comment section in the video. It was pretty fun. I enjoyed it. I was running around in the comment section replying to some of these people because I am
a glutton for punishment.
Glutton for punishment. Somebody in the chat asked us, why did the teachers union vote to return to work? Can you update us on that? They voted to return to work because they felt like they got enough of they felt like they got enough of what they were asking for, and also I think they felt
they had gotten about as much as they were going to give.
They had felt right, and that the public support maybe wouldn't be as strong for this action as with other actions, unfortunately, because of people like Jimmy Dore, attacking them, and that's why we made, and that's why that we wanted to talk about it, because he is one of many people supporting. He was one of many during this episode. People supporting the establishment, the power, the Democratic Party centers of power, Joe Biden, MSNBC, Lori Lightfoot. He was one of many people supporting them and attacking the teachers union and turning the public against the teachers union. And so that's why we talked about it. We didn't talk about it because we think that that Jimmy Dore is the mayor of Chicago. We talked about it because in our role as people who have a certain, we're on the radio in Alabama, to the extent that means anything, and to the extent that our podcast and our YouTube show means anything, then our job is a media thing. And so we were doing a media critique about how the media is responding to power, and he was responding in the wrong way if you support teachers.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to sum it up.
Right.
And there was another comment I saw about, Adam, what's your take on Texas allowing government workers to fill in for teachers that are out because of COVID? Thanks, Dallas, for that question. I am not familiar with the one in Texas. I have seen and heard bits and pieces from other places. I've even heard where like school resource officers, literal, armed, uniformed officers of the law have been serving as like de facto substitutes. I believe that's what you're referencing is something along those lines where, I believe it was a school district up north that even put out word that they could pool custodians and cafeteria workers, other support staff to come serve as substitutes in the classroom. I mean, when you're getting to that point, it's pretty absurd, right? It seems absurd on its surface. And if the whole point of in-school person learning was to prevent learning loss, if it was really about what's best for the kids, well then, come on now.
Right.
That's asinine. I mean, finding random folks, whether they work in the school in totally separate capacities or other agencies of the government, and just shipping them in to babysit. Okay, well, I mean, that's just babysitting, right?
Right. Which, childcare, there's a function for that. But,
right. I mean, and that's something that we have seen definitely exposed with this pandemic. It was the case beforehand, but, public schools are really the largest vestige of a welfare state that has deteriorated in this country. And without public schools, people don't have childcare. People don't have meals 1, 2, 3 times a day. People may not have access to other government resources because a lot of folks get plugged in to Medicaid and food stamps, rent assistance at their local neighborhood school.
Right. So
public schools are serving a function in our society that goes well beyond just the academic enrichment of young people, which, ostensibly is the reason for it. That's why we're supposed to have schools, is to educate people, but it goes beyond that. And I think it is kind of sad that we're at that point where governments would rather, subject adults to being de facto substitute teachers without any of the preparation or training. Now, it's not hard to become a substitute, and believe me, the pay will reflect that.
Right.
That's part of why we're seeing these staffing shortages and temporary remote learning in so many school districts, because they don't have a big bench of substitutes waiting to be called up. Even before the pandemic, most districts struggled to get substitutes, especially, the more difficult the school, the harder it is to find folks typically. And with the pandemic, of course, one of your biggest pools of substitutes is going to be retired teachers who want to come back and maybe do it here and there, make a little extra money to supplement their pension. Well, obviously, they are high at risk health-wise, and so you're walking into a disease incubator if you walk into a classroom in most schools where there is no social distancing. There's very little that's been done in terms of ventilation and infrastructure, like the physical buildings themselves and the safety there. So, there's a lot of people who normally would sub who aren't. When you're offering $50, $60 a day to people who, can then see that McDonald's is offering more, even if, as we discussed, it may be a fraud when they finally get hired on. But yeah, I mean, that's the difficulty, is when you're so insistent that you're not going to address anything with this pandemic that you would rather just pull random adults and stick them in front of a room full of kids just to keep the schools open. It's not about learning at that point.
Right.
It's not really about the kids at that point. I mean, yeah, the school's open, and so mom and dad can go to work, but that's really what it's about. But the asinine thing about it is, if school districts did, as the Chicago Teachers Union has requested, and actually have taken real steps to mitigate this virus and its spread, there would be less interruption to parents' work life. I mean, my daughter's school we were told, I guess, Thursday afternoon. It was 3:45, 4 o'clock. So at that point, some of the teachers have already left the building. They weren't prepared. We were told we would be shifting to virtual learning for yesterday and Monday. And that was because of staffing.
Right.
And given very little notice to prepare on either end.
Right.
As a parent trying to prepare,
Well, not even because like it's not safe. And that's what people are missing with this this teacher's issue about going to remote learning sometimes. Like, to a certain extent, it's not even about like it's not safe. It's like we just literally there's not the people there. We're not.
Right.
We just literally don't. And that sounds like what it was here. I mean, schools in Alabama have been in person virtually the whole pandemic. So
right. I mean,
it's not about safety. It's about like that we just literally don't have the bodies.
Yeah, I think the safety of the adults and children inside the schools was abandoned a long time ago in most places.
Right.
So it really is just a matter of logistics. And so, yeah, we're going to see more districts have to do this as people go into quarantine or as people are infected, as people have long-term effects and maybe can't return to work as quickly. They've changed the rules and want you to go back to work, I guess, 5 days now?
Yeah.
Instead of, it was 14 days and then 10 days. Now it's down to 5 days.
Right.
But that only works if you're feeling up to it. I'm sure if you have a very mild case of Omicron, maybe that, and you're otherwise healthy, 5 days may be enough, but that's not going to be the case for everybody. And, this is maybe a controversial thing to say, but in Alabama, let's face it, a lot of our folks have pre-existing health conditions. Mm-hmm. So when folks try to downplay the virus of, it's only for overweight, obese people who have to worry. It's only people who have diabetes and other conditions. Well, who the hell you think has all these conditions?
Right.
It's the masses. Just look at the stats. How many people in Alabama are suffering from high blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, and on and on. So all those factors are converging. And I just got to say, man, I really feel for these teachers and I feel for the kids. These kids don't know a normal school experience now for going on their third school year. And there is learning loss. That's a real thing. Even if some of the harebrained ideas to address it are not particularly effective, but it seems like all the more reason to have free college for everybody.
Yeah.
Hey, all the more reason to strengthen those pipelines to apprenticeships.
Right.
So these kids who are graduating high school, knowing that, they missed probably 2 years of solid instruction, they're going to be behind academically compared to their peers a few years ago. So let's make sure they can go to college if they want to, or get an apprenticeship if they want to.
Yeah.
Seems like a common sense kind of thing.
Support for this program comes from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 136 out of Central Alabama. Learn more at ibew136.org.